investors has there's a lot to do with money sometimes easy to find, but good money is hard. I'm a huge fan of investors who are there with you when you really need them. Just I think 2 weeks ago we were having an existential crisis about what's ThoughtSpot going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and we thought we'll just have a normal outside the office conversation. But usually if you bring board members into those conversations, they'll freak out, like, oh, these people don't know what they're doing. So, but Jay, we could, because he has two hats that he's wearing, right? He's wearing the investor hat, but we can ask him to remove that and, hey, go back to your entrepreneurial hat and come back. And we brought him in. We spent the whole day ideating, going back, whether it's Rami or Rami has the lowest latency when it comes to answering emails. You can ask him anything, and he's going to be answering this very fast. Nino, Shruti, Rajiv, this is we don't think of them as an investor outside. They're part of helping us build this company. So very happy to be here. Very lucky to have this group of people backing us. So Shruti asked me to talk about go-to-market. That was the idea. But I thought I'll start by talking about arrows. You might laugh at it, but modern arrows are a marvel of engineering. It's really, really amazing to see arrows flying in there in slow motion. If you really think through it, there are 4 big parts to an arrow. We all know the arrowhead, the tip of the spear, and a lot of attention is spent on that part. However, what is most fascinating is also the part shaft. This shaft is supposed to bend as soon as you shoot it from the bow. And the rate at which it bends, and then when it straightens up, it creates more kinetic energy and then pushes the arrow forward. So there is a lot of science that goes into modern arrows to figure out how much should it bend, how much should it not bend, how stiff it should be. And then, obviously, the fletchings. And the fletchings are going to allow it to spin, just like a bullet will spin out of a gun barrel. And that spinning is extremely critical because that's how it is going to go straight. And if you ever built an arrow for any sort of science project, you know you can never get this right. And if you don't get it right, your arrow is going to go sideways, right? It's a lot of science. And the last part is this knock. The knock where the actual contact point where the potential energy is stored and released through that. And there, if it is too loose, you will lose the energy. If it is too tight, the friction will lead. So there's science that goes into that as well. I can keep going on, 40 minutes on arrows. However, the point is when it comes to go-to-market, we make the same mistake. We think sales and marketing or the customer touch point, usually the sales, customer success, professional services, customer support, we think of that. But I don't think we should do that. We should think of go-to-market holistically. That is, a go-to-market is powered by a bunch of things. So for me, product, how flexible it is, could be the shaft. Marketing holds it steady to make sure that you're not wasting your effort, where it goes, how it goes, are you spending too much, are you spending too little. And then investors are, let's say, the bow and the potential energy. G&A, operations, finance, those things play a big part in how much efficiency are we able to get out of it as the arrow shoots forward. I know that was a little bit of a stretch, but not too much. ThoughtSpot, I'm lucky to have our sales head, Brian McCarthy, our marketing head, Scott, and Raja, our product head, all here because we really believe this. When you hear a title called GTM something, we want to be there to learn because sales alone can't do anything unless it is fully supported by this. So I thought I'll talk in that context. So around 5 years ago, I wrote a blog post about the difficulties of building companies as a young company in a market that is changing fast. So let's take a quick step back and look at what's been going on in our space. Let's say 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when large companies are being built. Salesforce, Oracle, all that, right? Y-axis is growth, x-axis time. Usually you start with an idea in a garage, and then you hire a bunch of misfits who know exactly what to do. And I call them misfits not in a bad way, in a good way. These are people who will sit in California, salespeople think they can sell in Australia. That's how they think. They don't like segmentation. They don't like telling what to do, what not to do. They like the entire world to be theirs. They will sell one in Seattle, next thing could be in India. And they thrive in those environments. Engineers, these are the, I won't say 10x engineers anymore after this weekend. But these are engineers who will just go home on a weekend and come back with a feature Monday morning. Really amazing, powerful people. They actually help build the company. In operation, you can hire just one person. They will do everything. They are the CFO. They are the inventory manager, everything. And then at some point in time, company gets to that next level of escape velocity, and then you start thinking, okay, now we need to bring a bit more structure. Maybe we should have a CRM system. Maybe shoebox and receipts are not a good enough idea. Maybe we should have QuickBooks. So a bit more of structure. A forecast call start happening. Pipelines are being monitored. And that's, let's call them builders. And then this is where sometimes things fall off, where we make the transition from builders to scalers. And here, companies sometimes make a mistake that it's all about people management at the highest level and has nothing to do with the front line. And they could over-rotate, but really well done though. This is the scale, this is the area where people who can come in and without losing the real soul of the company figures out how to scale. Really difficult to do. We end up over-rotating on experience. Basically ends up with a bunch of white men with the blue blazers and khaki pants. No offense to any of you if you're wearing that. Right? So this seems like a good way to sort of move a company. And the product arc will come down. No matter how good the product is, in 8 to 10 years, it will come down. However, by this time, they sort of had the escape velocity. Just like the Falcon X, take it up there. Once the Earth's gravity is no longer there, they can just eject the booster rockets. And then the secondary stage. And then you get into the space. There is no friction. You don't need all this heavy machinery to push you up. You eject the misfits, you eject the builders, and then you start cruising. And when you start cruising, you have few moats that you already have built. One is tech lock-in. I remember this is where if you buy a mainframe from IBM, you're basically done. You don't need to do anything else because you have to keep coming back to IBM to buy the next stuff. Brand. Powerful brand. People want to work. People wanted to work for a large brand. They didn't want to work for startups. That was risky. And the last one is capital advantage. When companies go public, they have tremendous amount of difference when it comes to how much money they have, how much capital they have, what's the value of equity. So which means they can acquire. All those things didn't exist for young companies. And because of those, what they used to do is to do things like this for the second arc. IBM has IBM Research, Palo Alto Research Center, Xerox Labs, AT&T Labs. They take their own time, invest in the next generation inside their company, or spin-ins. Cisco did this very successfully. They will do spin-ins or acquisitions. Like I said, they can acquire. These are all the magic that happens when the company build all these things, and it takes 10 years to do all this. And the problem is that today those advantages don't exist because cloud, for example, is about platform interoperability. Going from Oracle to Postgres to Aurora, if you don't have an API, if you don't have Kubernetes, if you don't have portability, that lock-in doesn't exist anymore. In fact, it becomes an anchor in the business model that you have, which completely nullifies. Culture. The millennials who are coming into the business, they're not coming in saying, I want to work for the largest company. In fact, working for a large company, it used to be, Oracle and IBM and HP used to be the large company. Now, if you look at Google, it's a legacy company for a lot of people. Salesforce has become a legacy. ServiceNow has become a legacy company. Palo Alto Network is a legacy company. So they want to not work for a brand, they want to build a brand. And from a culture point of view, they are really confident of their own skills in the sense that you can't hold them in just because you have a job. If the coffee is not from a single origin Ethiopia and it's not the right temperature, chances are they will walk to the next company. Right? How do you keep them motivated? That's a big part of the go-to-market. Last but not least, venture. Like he said, $100+ billion in venture capital. Private companies are valued hundreds of billions, sometimes 50 billion, sometimes 10 billion, 3 billion, 2 billion, 1 billion, billions and billions and billions. Amazon went public at 600 million, which means that's also equalized. All these advantages the large companies had have gone away. So there is an opportunity, but the threat here is that this 10-year horizon is compressed. It is compressing where it is now 2-3 years, maybe 4 years max. If we compress this x-axis, what do you do with this ejecting? How do you eject the solid booster rocket if the Earth's gravity is still there, but at the same time, you are also forced to go to the space at the same time? How do you build a model where you compress them and build them all in the same tent? This is an existential problem if you really think about the market that we are operating, the place that we are operating. How do you fit multiple camels in a tent? How do you tell a scaler to have empathy for a misfit? How do you teach a misfit that processes are not necessarily going to make you less of a person? Joining a meeting, having a project manager in the room is not necessarily an overhead. These are hard conversations to have. I believe for a company to really build all this, you've got to go through the entire organization and figure out how to build a structure that makes sense for the company to survive and thrive in that environment. So what I want to do is to go through the anatomy of an organization, function by function, really quickly, and then share some of the observations and the lessons and the mistakes that I've made, and I've seen made some mistakes many times. The first thing I will say is that it doesn't matter what you do, how small it is, how insignificant you think it is, how you think your company is just an acquisition target, you don't want to go to the next public company. It doesn't matter. It is important to start with an extremely ambitious goal. And there are two reasons why I think it is important. Number one, when you have an ambitious goal, you can inspire people and bring believers into the company. Not just have it, but believe in it. You have to have a goal and believe in it. Number two, when you have an ambitious goal out there, and if you believe in it, the kind of people who are joining the company are aligned already. It is much easier to lead a group of people who are looking at the North Star and pulling towards it. If there is a storm in between, you can veer off course, but you will look at that and come back. It is much easier when you have that, as opposed to looking at the next goalpost out there. It could be an exit, an IP, or something like that. I strongly believe it is important to have a mission before a vision. If you do that, you can get missionaries instead of just mercenaries. Start with that. Second, with that done, look at people. The reason why I think you have to build a group of people who are inclusive is because if you want to have misfits and builders and scalers, which I think is necessary based on my first slide, it is important to bring an inclusive culture, and that's where empathy comes. Without empathy, misfits will never understand why the hell are we having someone out here who's talking about QBRs. Why is someone talking about a 2-year plan when I need to make my quarterly numbers? Why should I take my day off to attend a training on closing when I know everything I need to know about the product and how to close? Why should I care about interviewing somebody as a bar racer for engineering when my job is in sales? These are all hard conversations to have. But without empathy, it won't happen. And there, I found that instilling, enforcing, integrating diversity from the right point of view, that is not just gender diversity, experience, age, gender, sexual orientation, all this diversity creates that empathy in every room. And there you will see that it naturally lends itself to a place where the tent is big enough to have 3 camels. Learn from different cultures. These are all, I won't go through all of them, but this one is interesting for me. That is, if your interview process is predefined to remove few people based on which school they went to, you probably will have a hard time finding the person who has the most grit. A mother who just gave birth and took 3 years off, probably coming back to workforce, know exactly how to go to sleep for 2 hours, wake up for half an hour, and then go back to sleep for 2 hours and come back. Compare that with the father who needs 8 hours of sleep. Tell me who has more grit. I mean, if she's coming back into the work and the resume that you're looking for says, I need to have 15 years of experience, you are automatically eliminating her from the group, and that matters. Maybe not the right school, maybe not the right companies that you're going to pick from. Sometimes, if you find 2 candidates and one actually reached there even without going through all the paths that the other person has taken, but still got there, sometimes you feel that they have more grit than the other person, and when going gets tough, you really want people with grit on your side. And the last point I'll make here is, when you build a tent large enough with a different group of people, there will be friction. And when there is friction, there will be gossip. And when there is gossip, there is always an opportunity for you to make a decision to believe the best or the worst. And natural human tendency will be to believe the worst. Did you know, Sudheesh, that he said, you are like this? Before you finish that sentence, you probably already made a decision that it is true because it is bad about me. If it is good sometimes, I don't believe it. You really have to be mindful to sort of hold, pause, and say, is it possible for me to assume the best? Maybe she said that, maybe he said that, but maybe there is a context that I'm missing here. Let me go figure this out. It's hard to say. I mean, hard to do, easy to say. But I find that, thinking more and more about how do you build a tent where the connecting tissues are as important as everything else. How do you make sure that the engine is not just on gasoline, but also the oil is poured into it? With that, the next thing will be communication. Very simple. Make sure that you over-communicate anytime you're in doubt. You have very good chance you're going to miss the quarter, and you don't want to tell that to the sales leader because you might think that you're going to spook that person by saying that. Maybe the funding won't come through if you miss the quarter. You know what? Go tell that. If the engineers think that the product is not good and the customers are telling you that the product is not good, and you worry that exposing that view directly to the engineer make them completely fall apart, guess what? They probably already think in the worst possible scenario there. No one in engineering will sit there and think the best case scenario when it comes to product execution, velocity, quality, all that. Every fork where we believe that there is an opportunity to communicate transparently versus holding back, go out and just put all of it out there. At ThoughtSpot, we use exec meeting before board meeting, use the same presentation that comes out of it for the board. After that, we take the same presentation and go to the all hands, and we leave it open for the entire company to ask any question. There is no whitewashing, there is no hiding. The problem, Mark Leslie said this very well, which is the problem with lack of transparency in communication is that it creates silos of information. And silos of information will metastasize into silos of power. And silos of power is politics. So if you don't want that to happen in a small tent with multiple camels, you have to make sure. And the last point here is that you really have to invest in your first line managers, that they are really comfortable having hard conversations before it is too late. It is really easy to sort of put it off. In fact, the natural tendency would be to say, you know what? I know this person is not doing well, but this person is doing well. I'm going to help him, not her yet, because it's waste of my time, it's my energy, I don't want to do this. And then after some time, it becomes so complex that you have no choice but to let her go, let him go. But if you do that well, that is before you're driving to work, you're in a good mood, do a inverted index of the problems in terms of difficulty, and then go tackle the hardest one. Because the more you do, the easier the life will be for long term. Decisions is a simple one. When you are at a fork, turn. I've always believed in that. if you make a bad decision, at least you can rectify it. If you don't make one, you can't do anything about it. You are confused whether it's the right model of pricing or not. You could wait 6 months to get all the data points, or you make a decision, and then you screw up. You make sure that the organization has the right humility and understanding to apologize and correct it, because you're at another fork. When you make life decisions based on fork, every fork, left, right, ultimately you'll get up in the right place. That arrow, if it is an intercontinental ballistic missile, it doesn't go point A to point B straight. It is constantly course correcting. That's the model that I believe an enterprise decision making, organization decision making should be. How many of you in this room are from marketing? A fair amount of, really good to see. How many are on product side? Very few. Look at this. So there is still some work to do. I really believe marketing, modern marketing is sales. I mean, I think if you're a SaaS business, there is no difference between SaaS. However, when it comes to accountability, when it comes to rewards, when it comes to sales compensation, when it comes to President's Club, where does marketing stack in there? Do they feel that they have the same KPIs? Are they driving towards the same KPIs? If not, there is a problem. I'll make one more point, which is you might be going after Uber. Let's say that's an established market. But if you're a young company, trust me, you are creating a market. There is no established market for a startup company. Marketing needs to really internalize what it takes to create a market in any market that it is entering. And that requires tremendous amount of grit, courage, and being relentless when it comes to how it attacks the problem. High velocity experimentation and force outside in thinking. It is very easy for startup marketing to become inside out. The technology, the cool people, the founders, the investors, that story deck that we keep building, no one cares. Outside. Sorry, I'll take 1 second. She's taking a photo. So I strongly believe that it is important to bring marketing into every forecast call, every QBR, every President's Club, every quarterly review meetings on sales, because there is no gap between sales and marketing. In fact, I see that they're next to each other, but there is a little bit of gap there. I'm going to talk about PR for a second. This is an extremely important but extremely usually underestimated, overlooked function. Customers want to hear who else is using it. It's a very simple thing. If you don't have a tremendous entrepreneurial leader for PR, go find somebody. And don't just hire a PR person. Find someone who knows exactly the pain points the customers are facing and how we attacked it. People don't have time for vitamins. They want Advil. How is your problem the Advil, not the vitamin? How is that story coming through a customer? How many customer stories can you tell? If you're in Singapore, in a financial sector, trying to an insurance company, trust me, they want to know an insurance company in Singapore, not a Chicago insurance company, not good enough. PR stories, local stories, again and again and again and again, relentlessly falling. The rolling thunder of PR is tremendous demand gen model. G&A, you might think, why the hell G&A is here? I can assure you more products fail because sales compensation was not set up right. More products fail because product operation, it was too much friction in the way of you selling it. Channel programs, complexity of deal registration. Things like that will kill products. It is so critical to bring G&A early into this thing and build an ops team that understands what it takes to really build velocity without losing governance, control, FCPA, all that stuff. They are as much of builders as anything else. HR, make it data-driven, extremely data-driven. If employee retention is the KPI, let them go through the entire thing, not just, and also make sure that they're trusted by the front lines. You don't want an HR organization that is just believed by the execs, and they're taking exec side, and that could be a culture killer as well. Product. This is an important point. If you are thinking that you are too young for acquisitions, maybe you should rethink, no matter how early you are. You can acquire for builders, you can acquire for market, you can acquire for customers. So I don't think any company is early when it comes to acquiring two founders who are trying to build a company and bring them into your company, because the more entrepreneurs you have in the company, the better you will be. Sales, I made this point about missionary versus mercenary. There is no time, there is no patience for coin-operated salespeople to come in and say, they are here to sell a product, and if you don't make, you hire them and fire them. If you as a leader think that is how your sales organization should be, they don't get it, they are just here to sell and run, that's what you will get. But if you bring a sales organization that understand that the product may be half-baked, but it needs to go in front of a customer and let them make it full, and then bring those feedback back into the product organization and build that virtuous loop, you will see that you will have a mercenary replaced with a missionary group of people who will stick with the company when things are going difficult, and they will get you out of the hole that the company finds itself in sometimes. Channel, I'm running out of time, so I'll quickly go through this. The next slide is probably my last substantial slide here. Channel, I believe that in a startup company you can't be an answer to everything for everybody, so it is important to find a product, a use case that you do really well. But now to get large market, you need to be everywhere. And if you want to be everywhere, you need to have an amazing, thriving channel. But for channel, remember, they're selling hundreds of products, which means can you have a 30-second pitch? Can you have a 3-minute pitch? And if you don't, sit on your marketing team, sit on your product marketing team, sit on your product management team, and figure out how do you distill that into a 90-second pitch, 30-second pitch, and a 180-second pitch, and that's it. And then put a program that is so frictionless that the partners love working with your company. Which brings us to the last slide, which is what Shruti really asked me to do. Crisp and pithy, I'll quickly go through it. The horizons as we start, the first one is early adopters. Don't care who, don't care what, as long as you take my product, take it and give me some reference back. However, it is important to make sure that they are actually using it. Because if you don't get actual feedback, no money, and it's a waste of time, it's an absolute waste of time. Second, once they do it, make sure that you take into the references. Because now that reference base is what is going to get you the next phase, which is people who actually will pay the money. These 3 cycles are what I think is the first horizon for the misfits to do. Now we will skip to the next one, which is take the product pitch that you have been making and flip that to outside in, which is now you take why it matters to customers, what are the use cases, what's the pain point, how are we solving it. Do that again and again in a way that it becomes repeatable. And the way to get leverage is not by doing more, it's doing less. What are we doing in our go-to-market machine that is taking away my efficiency? How is that marketing can get better and better, that the leads and demand that we're creating is turning into much, the conversion rate is significantly going up because we are fishing with better bait. And then how do we make sure the POCs and the POVs you are doing are becoming better? How do we make sure sales pitch is more crisp? How do we make sure that the channel programs are the best in class? And if you do all this right, what happens is you stop doing things that don't work, and then you're left with things that have highest return on investment. That is the leverage that you seek. And once you get there, you build the flywheel. Right? Because remember, all that could be art, but if you keep doing art without any science, that's like playing polo with donkeys. It's not probably the best way. They'll go all over the place, the ball somewhere else. So it is critical to bring science into this thing, and it's not something you start here, you bring it here, but here you now start over-rotating a little bit towards the science of sales. Productivity, capacity, metrics, but make sure that the people aspect and the art is not lost. And if you do all of that, you recycle the misfits between 4 and 5 to bring them into the next arc of the product. Because remember, in 2 years from now, you'll have to redo this again. To redo that, you need the misfits to be kept aside, and that purpose alone will hold them back in the tent. Sounds easy? I haven't done it successfully, and that's why it's easy for me to stand here and say it. I'll leave you with a couple of last slides. One is that this is hard, putting different camels in a tent and making sure they all get what they need to have the mission and the vision and be successful. And there will be good days and bad days. If you operate your function with a Damocles sword hanging on your head, if you don't perform, you're going to get fired. Trust me, they won't be able to perform. Psychological safety is the most important thing the leaders can provide. I'm not saying coddling the non-performers. Having open, transparent conversation, but no surprises. If someone is underperforming, they know. Someone is overperforming, they know. Someone is helping others, they know. Someone is happy, they know. Someone is not doing a good job, they know. Put it all together. When surprises are removed, They feel safe to ask for help when they need it. They feel it is easy to share. They know that my reference account can be shared with somebody because the organization appreciates that. They are not just measuring me for the end of quarter numbers. And if you do this right, you will end up with a tent where everyone finds their purpose. And as the company makes the transition from mind share to market share to wallet share, you keep gaining altitude without having to really eject all the builders away from the company, left with a bunch of people who don't know how to take a product from 0 to 10. Really difficult thing to do. I'm not saying that I'm an expert at doing it, but at least in theory it makes sense. And the last point I'll make is that it's not like startup is a calling that we all should do. It's another way to make a living. I know that in San Francisco, Bay Area, it almost feels like it's sainthood, everyone should be doing this. It's okay for some people to go join Google, some people to go join Facebook, some people to be at Oracle. Some of the best sales leaders that we have came from IBM, came from what is that company in Boston, that software company, everyone? PTC, EMC. These are all companies. There is nothing to be ashamed to recruit people with that kind of a company experience, because guess what? There is a reason why these companies have survived 100+ years. There is so much to learn, so much to do. All I will say is that in a day like this, I was walking this way and I was thinking, how blessed are we to be in this beautiful city, doing what we do, and getting paid a lot of money, working with good people. And the end of it, when it comes to building a company, there are 3 things that we need to provide to our teams. Make sure that the work they do matters. Second, make sure that they are able to make an impact and learn. And third, make sure that they like the people they work with. If they can make an impact and they're learning and it's a good group of people, I don't think the previous slide is impossible to do.